Earlier I dropped a video showcasing 15 Xilonen teams, but a lot of them had Furina. I want to show you that Xilonen doesn't need Furina, so let's put Furina in the Fortress of Meripede for the duration of this video. I've seen different variations of this team using Chiori and Kachina, which I'm a fan of. It's worth taking note of the fact that Navia's skill damage increases when you're producing more crystallized shards. While a burst applies enough Geo to take the skill to level 3 a few times, producing extra crystallized shards is going to help her take it higher. Xilonen's Geo application is one of the downsides, so she won't create as many shards, but she will shred Geo and Pyro resistance, as well as buffing Geo and Pyro damage. Even if Navia's skill deals less damage from there being less crystallized shards, it won't be by too much because of the buffs. And the upside is a normal's burst and Xiangling's burst will deal more damage. Overall, Xilonen is an improvement to this Navia team. Swapping out Pyro for Hydro, we have this team using Yelan and Xingqiu. You lose Bennett's attack buff, but you gain the buff from Yelan's passive, as well as there being 2 off-field damage dealers instead of just 1. The Hydro Resonance is going to buff Yelan's damage, and Xingqiu's C2 reduces the opponent's Hydro resistance by a further 15%. I prefer this team in single target to the last one, to be honest. One of my favourite things about it is that you don't have to pop Xilonen's burst every rotation. With Xingqiu's damage mitigation and healing, as well as the crystallized shards, you'll have enough sustainability where you could just save a burst for emergencies. Favonius weapons on both Xilonen and Yelan also means you could build less energy recharge on Navia, and focus on damage orientated substats. All this damage is going to leave enemies dead in the streets of Fontaine. You know who else is dead in the streets of Fontaine? That's right, Claire V. Nice one, Harlequino. She's another character that benefits from Xilonen. We know her vape teams are strong, her overloaded teams are nice too. Xilonen gives her mono pyro teams a buff, so if you want to swap out Zhongli or Xiangling for more personal damage on Harlequino, this would be the way to do it. There's a lot of debate over who's the better unit between Kazuha and Xilonen, but I consider them to be two cheeks of the same arse. You'll find the two pair together well in a lot of hypercarry teams. If you did want to swap out Kazuha though, you could use someone like Yelan or Fischl instead for either a vape or overloaded team. Arlecchino can't receive healing from teammates either, so if you wanted to skip Xilonen's burst, instead just saving it for times when the rest of the team is low on HP, you could shorten your rotations by just using a skill instead. I saw a lot of people struggling with building teams for Mualani last patch too. Xilonen opens up more options for Mualani, with you maybe opting for Mualani, Xiangling, Nahida and Xilonen. Nahida is going to provide some AoE damage, which is appreciated, as well as Dendro application to help keep Pyro on enemies. The massive elemental mastery buff from a burst though allows you to avoid building any on Mualani, which, if I was to have a guess, I don't imagine many of you built much more than 100 on her. It does help with the vape damage though, so Nahida has a lot of value here. Xilonen and her buffs are going to make Mualani drop nukes on enemies, but you do need to keep an eye on elemental application. You want Xilonen to trigger a Hydro Crystallize, otherwise Mualani isn't getting buffed. If you find it difficult in this team, you always have the option to switch Nahida out for your free Candace. She's going to give Mualani some HP from the Hydro Resonance, as well as a normal attack buff. With you getting the extra HP, you might want to swap some out of a build for the elemental mastery you're losing by dropping Nahida. If you wanted to do away with buffs and just get another damage dealer, you could always use Emily in the flex slot. She'll help you maintain the burning aura just like Nahida did for easy vapes. She does have one major downside though, obviously being that she's French. Mono Hydro is one of my favourite teams and Xilonen is a big benefit here. It's not awkward to trigger a Hydro Crystallize here like it could be sometimes with the last team. Kazuha is shredding Hydro resistance by 40% with VV, Xilonen by a further 36% with his skill, Xingqiu by 15% with his C2, Kazuha buffs Hydro damage by up to 40% with his burst, Xilonen by 40% with 4-piece Cinder City, Yelan has the buff from her passive, and Xingqiu is the other half of the Hydro Resonance that Yelan needs for the extra HP. Energy isn't an issue with Xilonen holding Fav and then there being 2 Hydro units. It's got crowd control, comfy healing, resistance to interruption. I don't know what more to say for this team other than give it a go. Okay, so you're pulling on the 5.0 banner to build up some pity because you don't like the look of the 4 stars on Xilonen's banner. Figured you'd pull a Chevreuse. The gold star flashes. Raiden, with no Chevreuse. I know how you feel, but you'll be glad to hear Xilonen can function in the same role as Chevreuse as a buffer in overloaded teams. Chevreuse performs slightly better in this role. It is a niche after all. but Xilonen isn't far off and is a lot comfier. If you have a signature weapon, she feels just as strong as Chevro's in overloaded teams, to be honest. If you want to, you have the option to play Kujo Sara instead of Fischl too. I'm hoping Mavuika will work as a Xiangling replacement in this team, and maybe an Electro Natlan unit in the flex slot. Sticking with Raiden, we have this variant of National. Before 5.1, a lot of people like Xingqiu and Bennett here. With Yilan instead though, we get less Hydro application but more damage, as well as a buff from a passive to the on-fielder. If Bennett was our sustain unit, Yilan wouldn't get buffed with him only buffing attack, but Xilonen shredding resistances makes her more universal. It's worth noting though, in defense of Bennett, Xiangling benefited a lot from him in his C6. She isn't going to get the Cinder City buff because Raiden's getting it, so Xiangling's going to deal less damage here. Raiden will deal more though, and you're not restricted to a circle. There are ups and downs to both sides, but I think it's interesting that Xilonen's introduced a way for non-attack scalers to still be buffed in Raiden teams. Should we get off-field burst damage dealers in the future that don't scale off attack, like Yilan, Xilonen's value will go up even more. If you wanted more units in the team to benefit from Xilonen's Cinder City set, you could swap Xiangling out for Sara, which would buff Raiden even more. Having so many variations of Raiden National with different elements is useful for Imaginarium Theatre too. I know what you're thinking, and the answer is no. I haven't forgot about Nouvelette. Before Furina came out in 4.2, people used to run Nouvelette with Fischl, Kazuha and Zhongli. He's got the passive that increases his charge attack damage by a certain percent for each different Hydro reaction triggered. The percentage increase is higher for having 3 different elements in the team, so it's not a bad option for him. Swapping Zhongli out for Xilonen does mean you lose the resistance to interruption, but you gain so much value from Xilonen's buffs that I think it's worth it. You can collect the initial crystallized shards and use them for a bit of resistance. Just make sure you anticipate enemy attacks and move around in Nouvelette's charge stance a little bit. People are speculating that Auroron could be an off-field DPS and Electro charge teams, and if that's the case, you could swap Fischl out for him. Obviously, nothing's confirmed yet, but I thought I'd throw that in there. Another of my favourite Xilonen teams is a double Hydro double Geo team with Yilan and Furina, but you can swap Furina out for Xingqiu. With there being 2 healers and damage mitigation from Xingqiu, it's an extremely comfy team that can face tank almost all content in the game. The Geo Resonance shreds enemies' Geo resistance by another 20%, increases damage by 15% and makes Noelle's shield stronger. 4-piece Gladiator works on Noelle, making it an easy team to build, because you're likely to have good pieces by now from farming so many bosses. To anyone with a C6 Noelle sitting on their bench collecting dust, this is your wake-up call to build her. She'll benefit your account for Imaginarium Theatre too, with you probably not having too many Geo characters built. Noelle's biggest downside in my opinion is that she's energy hungry. You can swap in and out of her without losing the Geo infusion though, so it's nice to have characters like Yilan or Xilonen holding Favonia's weapons to funnel particles back into her. Yoimiya's another character people have on their bench collecting dust, myself included. I won't lie, I simply prefer Arlecchino. I enjoyed this team though, and playing Yoimiya in a double Geo team gives us another way to build teams for her. For enemies that move around a lot or deal big damage in melee situations, it's nice to have the option to let Yoimiya stretch her legs. Xilonen's gonna make those fireworks pop so loud, even Yoimiya's dad will hear them. If you don't like the idea of having 2 sustain units, you could swap Zhongli out for Xingqiu. It won't be as comfy, but with a couple crystallized shards and Xingqiu's resistance to interruption, I think this will raise the ceiling for Yoimiya, at least against enemies that don't attack as much. So overall, Xilonen isn't tied to Furina. They simply have synergy, with one of Xilonen's biggest benefits being a buff to non-attack scalers that don't have a Bennett. Furina's one of the best non-attack off-field damage dealers in the game. There's always an alternative though. If you want to see Xilonen's teams with Furina, check out my video with 15 Xilonen teams that I dropped earlier. Check out my Candice guide I dropped last week if you want to know how to get the most out of yours, and take it easy.